Hi you guys, welcome back to another video. It is Shamira and I will be doing another day in the life video. I already have my procedures written down that I went over today. Not all of them, but usually I like to pull a few and then I'll write down information about them so that way I can go over them quickly. And we will be in my CPT book and then a little bit in my ICD-10 book as well. So let's just get into the video. The first procedure that I have here is a hysteroscopy and DNC. I had to review pathology in order to get my diagnosis codes. And what pathology stated was that it was an endometrial polyp. So for hysteroscopies and DNC, I have to go to hysteroscopy and then up here to the 58558 for hysteroscopy surgical with sampling biopsy of endometrium and or polypectomy with or without DNC. So 58558, and then for the endometrial polyp in my ICD-10 book, I go to polyp, which should be next. Yeah. You will find polyp, which you have to come over to this side because endometrium is right there, N84.0. And then what you will do from here is confirm it in the N section of your ICD-10 book. So go to that chapter, which is right after N84. Okay. N84.0, polyp of corpus uteri, polyp of endometrium, polyp of uterus, not otherwise specified. So that's gonna be my diagnosis, and then that is my CPT code. So I was done with that one and submitted it. What the provider had at first was uterine bleeding and a thickened endometrium. So whenever you have pathology and you get a definitive diagnosis from pathology, you go with pathology instead of the post-op diagnosis code that the provider had. My next one was pretty much the same. And let me see here. I did want to talk about another hysteroscopy that was different. It would have been the 58563. So for Highmark in Pennsylvania, they will only pay for the 58563 if the 3 covered diagnosis codes the patient has. And I believe those diagnosis codes are like menorrhagia. So if the patient has N92.0, I'm going to show you guys that in my book quickly. Okay. So they will only pay for the 58563 if the patient has one of these diagnosis codes. And I'm going to just pull up that policy because I did have it up. Let me see if I still have it. No, looks like I got rid of it, but I can look at it quick. Okay, so the only way for Highmark to pay for the hysteroscopy and endometrial ablation is if the patient were to have N92.0, N92.1, or N92.4, and that is on my next page, which is right there, excessive bleeding in the premenopausal period. So if you report, let's say N93.8, the dysfunctional or functional uterine bleeding, it will get denied and you will probably have to write it off because they are not going to pay it because that is not a covered diagnosis code. So when billing Highmark, you want to make sure you review their policies on some of the procedures that you are billing to make sure that your diagnosis code is covered. So my next third surgery was due to patient presents with history of abnormal pap smear, biopsy revealed findings of SIN3, and she's here for a LEEP conization with ECC. So a LEEP conization is a page back, and this is going to be on the cervix uteri instead of the corpus uteri, because we're going to be doing this ECC, or actually this LEAP, on her cervix. So this is going to be a conization of the cervix with or without vulgarization, with or without dilation, and curettage with or without repair. And it's going to be the loop electrode excision. That's what the LEAP stands for, so that's why I have it written in my book. And I have a note here that 57505, which is the ECC, you can see that up there, endocervical curettage, that is included in the procedure. So you do not bill for that separate, even though it is a, you know, a code on its own. You don't bill for that separate because it's included. So my CPT code is 57522. And pathology, I went to pathology, and pathology was not in yet for this one. So I had to hold it, and in a few days I'll check back with it and see if pathology came in. So surgery number 4, we have history of postmenopausal bleeding and thickened endometrium. We were doing a hysteroscopy in DNC. There was no definitive diagnosis on pathology, so I went with the provider's code. And again, that procedure is the 58558. And postmenopausal bleeding and the thickened endometrium. Postmenopausal bleeding is right here, N95.0. And you can just search that in the index, but I had already known where to go. So N95.0, and then the thickened endometrium is going to be your R9389. R9389. Abnormal findings on diagnostic imaging of other specified body structures. So let me just go on the index. We're kind of doing this backwards, but I already knew where to go in the tabular list. That's why I just showed you guys those codes. But let's go to where is it? Right here. And we have bleeding, postmenopausal, N95.0, and then thickened endometrium. You just have to flip through. And that is going to be thickening endometrium, R93.89. Alrighty, so we have surgery number 5. We have history of high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion on a cervical pap smear, and we're going to be doing a cold knife conization this time. So instead of doing a LEAP, we're using a cold knife, and that one was reported with 57520, code knife or laser. So it's different because of the technique that is used. So 57520. And when I went to pathology, the ECC that they did came back normal, but the cervical cone had CIN3 was noted. So the diagnosis codes that they had previously were R87613, and I ended up changing that code, and I'll show you guys why. So for the CIN3, you will have to go to neoplasia. Right. Oh, over here. Neoplasia, intraepithelial, cervix, grade 3, which is severe dysplasia. You can also see carcinoma, cervix uteri, and site 2, and that's a D06.9. So I will have to go over there to my D06, and that's just one page over. D06.9, and the reason why we're using unspecified is because it didn't say that it was the endocervix or the exocervix, and it doesn't say that it's other parts of the cervix, so we go with D0609. And before we got pathology. The provider had reported the R87613, the HGSIL. That's what high grade squamous intraepithelial lesion stands for. And the reason why we couldn't use it is because it is an excludes 1. So you do not report any of these codes with these codes because these are excludes 1. You can't report them. So because we got the pathology back that confirmed the SIN3, you see that right there, we report D069 for this conization with a cold knife. Procedure or surgery number 6 was a sterilization for a bilateral tubal fulguration, and the provider grafts both tubes one at a time, obviously, and they made 3 segments. There were 3 segments of the tube that were cauterized, and adequate burn sites were achieved. So I'm gonna go this way to the oviduct and ovary, and this was a laparoscopic procedure, and I'm going to report the 58670. And for my sterilization, my diagnosis, you would have to go to sterilization. And for those of you wondering, I do have Encoder, Encoder Pro to be specific, but I really don't use it unless I'm trying to see if there are bundling edits or NCCI edits for like 2 surgeries that I'm billing. But anywho, I like to use my books. Sterilization, see Encounter for sterilization. So now I have to go to Encounter. See, you guys can tell I don't ever look up sterilization, or I would have known to go to Encounter. I have my codes memorized in my head. Some of them, not all of them. Okay, so it said go to Encounter for, and then we have to look for sterilization, which is right there, Z30.2. So that's all the way in the back where I have my little tab here for contraceptive. And Z30.2 is right there, sterilization. That was procedure number 6. Now we're gonna move on to number 7, which is an office procedure, and we did an endometrial biopsy. I had already reviewed this biopsy. I was just waiting on pathology, and it says both, I had 2 of them that I was waiting on pathology, and both of them came back with no diagnosis. So I'm going with the provider's diagnosis. And that biopsy is 58100 right here. Corpus uteri endometrial sampling biopsy with or without endocervical sampling biopsy, without cervical dilation, any method, and it is a separate procedure. And I have a note that if they were to do a ECC, which is right over here, 575, oh no, that's not the ECC, that's a biopsy on the cervix. If they were to do a biopsy on the cervix in addition to a biopsy on the endometrium, I think I said that right. If they're doing a biopsy on the endometrium and they also take a sample of the cervix, it is included. So I do not bill that separate, but this one was not the case, and I only went with the 58100. Next up, my 9th one, since I had 2 there, so 7 and 8 were the ones that I just reviewed pathology on. The 9th one was also a office procedure, and we did a colposcopy on, a cervical biopsy, and an ECC. So I'm just gonna go back a page to the cervix uteri. Endoscopy is the type of procedure that it was, and we did a biopsy and ECC. And you see right there, 57454. I put the abbreviations in my book. This was like maybe like a year, almost 2 years ago, just because I wanted to get familiar with the little abbreviations they use. So that's why I have that there, BX and ECC. So that is what I like to do, so that way it just stands out to me. And my diagnosis codes for this was, they had HPV and LSIL or LGSIL, which is low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion. And those codes are R87-810 and R87-612. I reviewed pathology, and I have here nothing from pathology, so I went with the provider's diagnosis codes, and I will show you guys those codes because I have a little tab here for R87, and it was R87-612, which is the LGSIL for the cervix, and then R87-810 for the HPV on the cervix, high-risk human papillomavirus, and it was a positive result, so R87-810 was also reported, and there were no excludes ones for both of these codes, so I was able to use both of those. So that was surgery number, or procedure number 9. What do I else have here? 10th surgery. I'm waiting on pathology. Came in with no definitive diagnosis code, going on provider's post-op diagnosis. Okay, so there was no, what type of surgery was this? Okay, I see it now. This one I was holding on pathology, and it was a vaginal hysterectomy done as an outpatient surgery. So I had both these codes holding, so 58260 and 58290. The reason why I had both of them is because I had to wait for pathology to come back, so that way I can confirm the weight of the uterus, because these codes, you have to know the grams, and if you don't know, then you always go with the lesser code. But this patient, she had 38 grams, so we went with the 58260, and there were no other diagnosis codes on pathology for me to report. There was an extra day post-op, and if you were watching my other previous day in the life video, I think that was the one, I showed you guys that the 99024 is our post-op day code. So she only had one, and I reported the Z9710, which is absence of uterus and cervix. So let me show you guys that. Absence of, and this code I have memorized as well. So Z9710, acquired absence of both the cervix and uterus, and that's what I reported on my post-op code. Okay, I think I'm done with that page. And then my next thing that I had to review was a triage note. So normally this would be an E&M. It would be an office outpatient visit. Don't worry about my markings. I'm going to talk about that next. Normally I would be billing an E&M for this triage note, but the reason why I couldn't was because my midwife attested the resident's note, and she is not a teaching physician. Actually, she didn't even test it. She just signed the resident's note, and midwives have to document their own documentation, so in order for them to bill, and she did not. She only signed the note, so I had to bill a no charge for that, and that patient had came in for decreased fetal movement at 36 weeks. My next triage note I could bill for, and this time a resident was involved, but an actual teaching physician attested the note, and I was able to bill for it. So this patient had came in with right flank pain, which is abdominal pain. We weren't sure if it was a UTI, a kidney stone, or pyelonephritis. I think I said that right. So that's why I circled one undiagnosed new problem with uncertain prognosis. So that is what I have for my number and complexity of problems addressed. And then we also ordered labs, reviewed them. We ordered an ultrasound that my provider interpreted. So I'm going to circle, actually I accidentally circled this one, but I meant to circle this one. And it was a moderate risk because they had given her morphine intramuscular. So morphine is definitely something more so like in the moderate and high area, not so much low. So I went with the 99214 for this E&M level. And right now I'm just reviewing some vaginal deliveries, and that section I have right here. But I feel like we always go over vaginal deliveries, so I know I went over some vaginal deliveries in my last one, so I'm not going to go over them again. But this is the section that I would be in, or I will be in, as I review these deliveries. And that's it for the video, guys. So I hope you guys learned something. Give the video a thumbs up, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.